Okay, we are recording.
All right, so everyone, welcome, and thank you for bearing with us for a bit. My name is Jamie Fitch. I'm the Sustainability Coordinator for the town of Scarborough, and I manage the town's Plover Volunteer Monitoring Program. And as you may be able to tell, this is all new for us because usually we're doing these trainings in person, and it's a much different situation. So thanks so much for bearing with us right now. And also thanks so much for being a volunteer beach monitor this season. There's lots of people still joining, so I'm not going to, maybe I'll wait a few minutes before we dive right in, since it's just 3 o'clock now, or a couple minutes after. I do just want to let everyone know that we are recording this session. For the volunteers who aren't able to join us live, this will be uploaded to YouTube at a later time, and those who aren't able to join us live will join us or be able to see the training at another time. But it looks like we've got at least 12 volunteers with us right now, so that's awesome that you guys were able to join us. And I'm just going to run through a few housekeeping things, and then hopefully everything is going to work with technology, and we'll work through Maine Audubon's training. So let's see, you're all on mute right now as attendees, and you can see us, and perhaps you can see actually you can probably see the PowerPoint happening, the first slide of the PowerPoint right now. And if you're welcome to ask a question at any time during the training. At the bottom of your screen, there will be a green button that says raise hand. You may need to just, if you're looking on a computer, hover your mouse on the screen and you should see it at the bottom of your screen. Or if you're using a phone or a tablet, you might just need to tap on your screen to make the button appear. And we'll be monitoring that during the training. And we'll jump in, unmute you, and let you know that you can ask your questions. So don't be shy with questions. And let's see. I also just wanted to let you know, hopefully you've all received, if you've signed up to volunteer before May 1st, you should have received an email from me with forms that the Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife needs for this program, both to kind of track your volunteer hours, but also because they receive federal funds for this program and your time helps leverage that. So there was a packet of forms, and if you would prefer to have a mailed copy, just send me an email and I'll get one in the mail to you. Those forms I just need back by the end of the season, and if you want to do the kind of the sign up forms and get those to me and hold on to your tracking and observation forms until the end of the season, that's great. Or if you want to just send everything to me all at once at the end of the season, that is fine too. You can either scan them and email them to me, send them to Town Hall in the mail, or you can drop them off in person at Town Hall once it reopens. The email also included some additional information. So Audubon is going to go over a lot of kind of the life cycle of the plovers and what to look for when you're out there. I sent their kind of overview sheet to you. All of that information will be covered today. I sent you a brochure called Sharing the Beach with Shorebirds. That talks a bit about plovers and then also gives a really good summary of the town's ordinances that relate to plovers. And then I also sent you excerpts from the 2 town ordinances that have specific sections dedicated to plovers. One is our piping plover protection ordinance and the other one is our animal control ordinance. So a little bit of information on our ordinances there. I think probably the brochure is the most easy to understand, but wanted to make sure that you had the information that you need. And also you should have received in the mail your 2020 parking pass. So this will get you into the municipal lots at Pine Point. And there's actually, for those who are volunteers at Higgins, there is a parking spot that Higgins down by the Champion Street access point that volunteers can park at. Our volunteer down there, Glennis Chabot, will go over all of this stuff with you folks if we've got any Higgins volunteers with us. Glennis does a separate training for the Higgins volunteers in person, kind of walking you through things. And then for Ferry Beach, most of you have probably know that Ferry Beach is currently, the lot at Ferry Beach is currently closed. But if your parking pass is displayed in your dashboard windshield or on your dashboard, you can park on Ferry Road just outside the gates to Ferry Beach. And I just dropped. Oh, go ahead.
You have a question. Do you want to?
Sure.
Carolyn, do you want to? Did you have a question?
When was the packet and all those things you were just talking about sent?
They were just sent on Friday. So
I got several emails, but I don't think, but I'll look again.
Okay.
I don't think I got a packet, but I will look for it and then I'll contact you if I have problems.
That's great. That would be good. Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you.
The other thing that the packet that went out in the mail includes is either an ID badge if you are a new volunteer this season, or if you misplaced your badge from last season. If you still had your badge from last season, the packet included a new sticker for the back with important phone numbers. Audubon's Plover hotline number is different this year. So the sticker needed to be updated. So I sent everyone a new sticker if you indicated when you signed up that you still had your ID. And you might just want to update that in your cell phones if you have it pre-programmed. Just know that Audubon's Plover hotline is different this year. Excuse me, is different this year. So I think those are the big housekeeping things that I wanted to cover. I think we will go over a bit about what the town's ordinances say in terms of restrictions and dogs on the beach and whatnot after we go through Audubon's presentation. So Laura, if you want to take over, you're welcome to.
Great. So I'm hoping, can everybody see the presentation? It has piping plovers and least terns in Maine, and there's an image of a piping plover with a chick and a least tern with a chick.
Yeah, we see that.
Okay. That's the hardest thing about this, is not getting that feedback from what people can see. All right, so thank you all very much for coming. Apologies, I am literally sitting in my work vehicle in the Wells Public Library parking lot using their Wi-Fi, giving this presentation, which is less than ideal, but hopefully this all can make sense, and that you guys can all learn a lot, because I'm sure many of you know a lot already, but oh, there we go. Sorry. But I do want to make sure we at least cover some of this. So most of what we focus on is the piping plover or plover, you can say either. It's a small sandy colored shorebird, and their nesting range starts from really the southernmost part is in North Carolina all the way up to Canada. Here in Maine, they only nest from Ogunquit Beach up to Georgetown because they need sandy beaches in order to nest and raise their young. So, so we don't have piping plovers in down East Maine, but that's not because we're at the northern limit of their range. It's just there isn't the habitat. But there are nesting plovers as far north as Newfoundland. They winter in the Bahamas and in the southern United States, which makes it all the more impressive that, you know, I literally saw piping plover tracks in the snow in March on Ogunquit Beach. And knowing that these birds had come up from Florida, Georgia, the Bahamas, but they come out to get prime real estate on our beaches as early as possible. I will talk about a little bit about least terns as well with you all, because least terns sometimes do nest on Higgins Beach and on Western Beach, which is owned by Prout's Neck, but since it's adjacent to Ferry. And these guys are a little different in that they're colonial breeders. They nest in with other birds, and anybody that's been near a least tern colony, it's pretty memorable because they are quite defensive. I always say they're very good communicators. They let you know you are not welcome around their eggs and their chicks, and they will dive bomb you and squawk at you and make sure you know that you're not wanted. But I personally appreciate it, especially when some of the sneaky efforts of plovers to deter you is not always as well understood by humans. So we group these two species together because they are both what we call beach habitat specialists. So that is, these birds, they need sandy beaches in order to raise their young. There is nowhere else these guys can do this, and they rely heavily on camouflage. These are two nests. The upper left corner is a least tern nest. The lower right is a piping plover nest. And obviously, these birds are not winning any architectural awards for their elaborate nests, but you would be amazed at how well camouflaged they are on the beach, for those of you that have not seen them. They're really done incredibly well, and their whole life strategy really is all around their time on the beach, and it's pretty incredible how good they are at really raising their young on the beaches. So they're slightly different birds, but they're grouped together, and that those are really Maine's only beach habitat specialist species. And again, they do rely heavily on camouflage, and this is, I think, both their greatest asset, but it also can be a challenge. It is not unusual for people to say, oh, well, why, I don't understand, there aren't any birds around here. And they can frequently be right in front of you, but people might not see them because their chicks, their eggs, and even the adults themselves are incredibly well camouflaged. And if they don't think that you see them, they may just hunker down and stay still, and people can walk by within feet and inches, really, and not know that they're there. So one of the things that I'm always trying to get across to people, and I would appreciate your help in educating people, is that piping plovers use the entire beach. People will see the restricted area, and that's really for their nesting areas. They nest really in the very sparse dune and in the upper beach, lower dune transition. There's often a misperception that they nest in the dense dune grass, but that is not true. They tend to not nest in the dense grass because it's really a lot easier for a predator to sneak up on them, so it's not as secure. So they tend to nest in a more open, exposed spot where they can have a commanding view and not be surprised by any predator that would try to eat them or their chicks or eggs. That is where the eggs themselves are, but they feed really in the entire beach, and they need to go down to the intertidal area. So that's often one of the best places to see them because when they're feeding down at the water, they're a little bit more conspicuous. But it's important for us to try, those of us that know, to try and communicate to people that say, oh, I would never bother the birds. I never go inside the restricted area or in the fencing. I always make sure, yes, thank you so much. That's obviously the right thing to do. But these birds are wild animals, and they move, and they need the whole beach. And both of these birds are protected under the State Endangered Species Act. Least terns are listed as an endangered species in Maine, but they are not listed on the federal level. They are listed, they are protected by the Federal Migratory Bird Treaty Act as well. So they do have federal protection, but just a little different. Piping plovers are also listed on the Endangered Species Act here in the state of Maine, but they're listed as threatened federally. I guess, I'm not going to go into that. So one of our big challenges is just that when the birds start arriving, they really, as I mentioned, they come in March and in April. And this is when there's still not a lot of people on our beaches. If anybody's been out on the beach the last few weeks, they can tell you it has not been terribly pleasant most days. It's very windy, it's cold. So when the birds arrive, they look and they see, oh, look at this, all this wonderful habitat. And even though beaches are they're a very tough place for other wildlife to make a living, and piping plovers and least terns have taken advantage of the fact that there's not a lot of wildlife that actually lives on the beach. Because the temperatures are so extreme, again, as I mentioned, it can be, the weather can be very cold and windy in one moment, and then very hot and bake in the sun the next. There's very little cover for both weather and also from predators. And it's also just simply a dynamic environment. For those of you that have spent some time looking at our beaches and at a beach like Higgins, I mean, you can't really, it changes one year to the next. So it can even change quite a bit within the same year. So for most wildlife species, the beach is not a very good place to be. But in the summertime, people really like them. And so that's where it gets very complicated, where plovers that arrive around this time of year or even earlier see this sparse beach. This is actually 2 images from the same stretch on a Gunkwit beach on the same year. So when the people really coming, though, they're a lot more challenging. Not to say people and plovers can't coexist, because we have a lot of great success stories. It just takes a little more work. So a bit more about when they get here. Again, they come in March. So right now we are just in really the beginning busyness of finding nests. Birds have been around and I saw some birds scraping, making practice nests on Higgins even in March, but I think the cold April weather slowed them down quite a bit. And now we're finding, we have, I think, about 20 nests right now in the state of Maine, including 2 on Higgins and several on Western. But they stake out a territory, look for a mate. They do what we call make scrapes, which is the little indentations in the sand all over their potential territory, and the male will make many of these scrapes, and the female will pick which scrape she likes the best, and that's eventually what will likely become the nest. Again, nests can look quite different. Often they are on a high little spot, but they're often concealed by at least a little bit of vegetation, but you can find them way out exposed in a sand flat or hiding under the cover of dune grass. Again, they tend to not be in very dense vegetation because it's too easy to be crept up on by predators. But really, as far as I'm concerned, I never cease to be amazed to see where nests pop up. And the reason why today is so crazy is we literally, there's a new nest on Wells Beach in the busiest public access point from the jetty parking lot in what is very hard packed cobble, almost like a gravel road. So these birds, they'll nest anywhere that looks good for a plover and where their eggs can be camouflaged. And I will say that that nest and that I've just mentioned is incredibly well camouflaged. So the eggs, they typically lay 4 eggs, and it takes about a week for that full clutch to be laid. Once that 4th egg is laid, then they start incubating. So it's not unusual if you see a 1 or 2 or even 3 egg nest to not see an adult nearby, and that's not a thing to be concerned about. Males and they're waiting because they want those chicks to all hatch at the same time. And Jamie, remind me to send you a cute little blog post that talks about that and why the parents have an incentive for all their chicks to hatch at the same time. So after they have a full clutch, both males and females take turns incubating. It's, I think, human nature. People always talk about the mom plover, but odds are very good that it's the dad as well, which I think is a nice little thing to share with people as you're talking to the public. So after those 28 days, that's when the chicks hatch. This is by far the cutest time in the life cycle, but also the most vulnerable and dangerous, because these chicks, they move a lot. This is something I cannot really say enough. I've seen birds move over, or chicks, 4-day-old chicks move over a mile down the beach. So in places where perhaps in April looked like a good place to nest and then the chicks hatch and the parents decide to go somewhere else, they can cover a lot of ground and they will move around trying to find a safer place for their chicks and a good habitat, good foraging habitat as well. So this again is something that we're always trying to explain to public and beachgoers. These chicks, they don't return to the original nest site. Within hours of hatching, they have to find their own food. The chicks don't get food delivered to them as a robin would. They have to find their own food, so they are running all over the beach looking for food. So in order to defend the defense of both nests and chicks, again, camouflage is typically what they rely on most. If the adult does perceive that a predator is nearby, either the nest or the chicks, it will do what's called a broken wing display. I'm sure many of you have encountered a killdeer nest and seen this type of activity where a bird, a killdeer is almost like a cousin to the plover. They're in the same genus, and they will make awful squawking noises and try and do their best to win an Oscar for the most dramatically injured bird to try and lure a would-be predator away. And you'd be amazed, I've seen this work on humans, on dogs, on gulls, on crows. It is surprisingly effective, and it can trick us. If you ever do see this, please be careful and back away, but also watch where you're stepping. You may even step on a nest, but if you see this, you're too close to the nest or too close to the chicks, so please give them some space. If all that goes well, after about 25 days, then plover chicks can fly. And so that's really when we stop monitoring them. We call them a fledgling, and that is a success. That's a success in our productivity. So why are these birds an endangered species? It's a long story, but a lot of it really just boils down to the fact that they are masters of the beach, and beaches are popular places. So they've lost a lot of habitat in terms of development, seawalls that can damage the beach sometimes. Natural predators like foxes, crows, and gulls all do very well where there's a lot of human interaction. Where we go, we create good cover for foxes and fox dens, and we bring food that we share with our gulls, whether intentionally or not. So we have an unnaturally high predator load for what would be natural predators. We also, of course, bring with us our beloved domesticated dogs and cats, which can also be predators. And then these birds also just have to deal with human disturbance and, of course, sea level rise and increased storm surge that we're seeing along our coasts. Of course, so one of my things that I'm always trying to say is that these birds are not endangered because they are stupid. I mean, I've had many people tell me, well, why don't they just nest in a tree? That seems like a better choice. But really, no, they're endangered because they've adapted to master the beach, and sometimes our activities make that a lot more challenging. So we at Maine Audubon, we do monitoring, we do outreach and education. Honestly, I think one of the best things that we do for the birds is just put up stake and twine. It's truly not Fort Knox. Clearly anybody can easily go over it, but it does limit, most people will stay out. And people keeping out of the dunes makes for a healthy beach. And really the most important things that plovers need in order to succeed is a healthy beach. And that's something that humans benefit from also very greatly. So this is one of the key tools in our toolbox in order to give the birds space and to help the beach stay healthy. So of course, we need a lot of help to get all this work done. And what we need from you is really, the key things are to look and to listen. Another thing that I meant to put a slide in about this is that what we really also rely on is your education of people, if you feel comfortable. Of course, we really rely on your eyes and ears out on the beaches, especially as our numbers are increasing. It's hard for us to keep tabs on all of our sites and know what's going on on a day-to-day basis. So you all being out there, giving us reports, telling Jamie what you're seeing, and talking to the public, really, it's quite powerful, and we really, really appreciate it. And just being a great observer is an incredibly powerful thing. A fun little side trick I mentioned Killdeer, but just a little side note, there are other birds that can kind of look like a plover chick that you might encounter. This is a Killdeer chick, as I mentioned. It's a plover cousin. And they typically nest more in like ball fields and gravel pits, but they have nested in some dune areas. The chick you see on the right, that's actually a chick I rescued out of a jetty at Wells Beach. The parents had nested in the dune. And I also often kind of refer to our volunteers and to ourselves as detectives. So we're constantly out there trying to read the sand and see really where the bird activity is. On the left, you can see the track of plover tracks. Those of you that have seen them, they're very distinctive, pigeon-toed, typically in a very straight line. They don't have a hind toe, it's just 3 toes that you see. And those indicate where the birds are. On the right in the center is actually a little scrape, one of those practice nests or a courtship nest that they make. And you can see there's a whole lot of tracks that surround that scrape. And those are the things that we're looking for to identify potential nesting areas. And if we see a scrape like that, if at all possible, we'll put up fencing to try and protect it. I'm not, so I actually wanted to reach out to see, in some of our municipalities, volunteers will sometimes spot for vehicles. And I know that with all the challenges currently, I know your public works department is going to be limited in resources. And so I didn't know if there would be some interest or opportunity for some volunteers to help spotting vehicles. But that can be also a really helpful thing. So whenever there is a driving on the beach in a nesting area, there needs to be a person walking in front of a vehicle at a walking pace. So, and whenever you're spotting for a vehicle, I really think the most important thing is to know where the birds are before you get vehicles on the beach. What we don't want is a vehicle to just go out there and then all of a sudden you realize that you're in a tough spot. And this is especially important with chicks because they are so mobile. It's important to walk in front of a vehicle, and you're really looking for disturbance and watching for agitated birds. So especially, for example, with chicks, it might not just be running over a bird, it could also be separating a family. So some of a brood could be far away and disperse, and then the adults would not be able to find them and then protect them. It also could cause enough disturbance that the birds might abandon. So again, this is something typically that's done in-house in Scarborough, but I just wanted to put this slide in here. So it's something that might happen that might be useful for you all to know. And whenever folks are driving on the vehicle, we always say stay as low in the tidal zone as possible, which of course is much easier driving anyway, but it's also less chance for running over a nest. And always use a spotter, but just because you have a spotter doesn't mean you can stop paying attention. And again, to beat a dead horse, chicks move. So they can be very challenging. They go from the waterline for the dune. They're not always with adults. And another really important thing to remember is that one of their defense mechanisms is to freeze when they are scared and they feel threatened. If they realize they cannot outrun a would-be predator, they will just stop and try and look, like a rock. And it truly does work. They're almost impossible to detect once they stop moving. But if there have been instances where somebody will think, oh, it's an injured chick, and that can make them more vulnerable to being picked up, which is never a good thing. So in that note, I just want to make sure you guys at least have a little bit of background on law enforcement. Of course, this is not what we're here to do. We're here to educate, but I want you to understand a little bit more about the laws that protect these birds. So when it comes to the Endangered Species Act, the term is take. A take of an endangered species is the illegal act. So take doesn't, I mean, people generally think of killing, but it's more than killing. The federal term for take means to harass, harm, pursue, hunt, shoot, wound, kill, trap, capture, or collect, or even attempt to engage in any such conduct. So, you know, even some would-be harmless thing has the potential to be a take and really should be taken seriously. And we have a few more main examples than I would like. Domestic dogs and cats have both killed piping plover, adults and chicks, and multiple communities, I'm sure you all know. And so it's an unfortunate thing for everyone. I think as a dog and cat owner myself, that would be that's the last thing that anybody wants to happen. So that's a lot of why we have these rules, is to try and keep people safe from accidentally killing an endangered species. Another thing which I alluded to earlier is that chicks have been picked up, especially if the chicks when they're freeze in response to a potential predator. So they've been removed and taken elsewhere, way more than Phippsburg and Wells. I think I've seen this about on every beach now. When this happens, this is actually one of the few times where the most important thing we want is to get that chick back on the beach with its parents. So if somehow you become aware of an instance like this, please get a hold of Jamie or the Plover crew or IFNW or somebody as soon as possible so we can help get that chick back to where it belongs. Vandalism of protected fencing has resulted in abandonment and other challenges in nesting. And to avoid all this, that's why we have beach management agreements. And this is so the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife does not have to approve every permitted activity. So IFNW and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service will work, and we will to a degree work with the municipalities or beach landowners to make sure that towns are protected from a take. And so you guys have one, and that's part of why we do all this. I just want to make sure you guys know, if there is something that you see, one of the most important things to do is I say secure the scene. Try and make sure the area is not disturbed. We don't want a bunch of footprints like going in and out of a nest, because law enforcement will go there. They will literally put in crime tape and try and read the sand to figure out what happened. So we want to make sure to minimize any potential disturbance. The most important thing is to make all the appropriate calls and to not stop until you get a hold of a live person. So whether that's getting a hold of Jamie or one of us at Maine Audubon or a game warden or somebody, or the IFNW biologist, don't stop. And I think that's great that your badges have a list of numbers on them, Jamie, because I think that's a great way to you have those numbers there and you can keep calling one of us until you find a live person. And the other thing to do is to just be a good observer and document what you really see and know. It's important not to say, oh, well, this person meant to do this. Law enforcement doesn't like that. They just want to know what were the actions you saw, what do you really know? So hopefully none of you ever have to deal with this, but I like to make sure that you guys are prepared in the worst case scenario. The most important thing is, of course, what not to do, which is never, ever, ever put yourself at risk. I know a lot of volunteers are very passionate and dedicated, and I don't want anybody to put themselves at risk for these birds. Also, never handle a bird, either dead or alive, unless you are explicitly told by an official biologist. That pretty much that never happens. So don't handle a bird. If you see a dead bird, don't touch it. Call somebody first. And of course, don't interfere with the scene of the crime. So we really, I can't stress enough how much we depend on all of you and how much you really enhance our ability to get this work done. And we're all in this community, these communities together, and we're making it so that people and plovers can share the beach, and I really appreciate it. So thanks so much. I'm sorry for the awkward kind of start and how this is sort of not the ideal format, but I will try and answer any questions if you have any right now.
I don't see any hands up right now. So I think, Laura, I'm going to go through just quickly the town's general ordinances. And for those who are newer volunteers with this program, you will learn that a lot of this is focused on, or at least in Scarborough, a lot of it is focused on dogs on the beach. So a lot of our restrictions and everything do relate to where dogs can and can't be and what times of day they are allowed on our beaches. So I just want to give a quick overview of that. And again, everything is kind of outlined in the Sharing the Beach with Shorebirds brochure that the town puts together. The back is all about information for dog owners. And last year, the town created these new signs, the dog access signs. I'm going to hold that up. Hopefully you all can see. So the green signs are posted at our beaches from Labor Day through May 15th. And May 15th, these blue signs go up, just kind of outlining the different laws and times of day when the dogs can be on the beach. And what beach you're on or where the dogs can be depends on which beach you're on. So I'm going to focus on between April 1st and Labor Day. That's when these restrictions first go into place. And on Higgins Beach, and for those who, I mean, I'm sure you all have visited our beaches, and throughout the summer, you'll become intimately familiar with the beach that you are assigned to or that you've signed up to monitor. So on Higgins Beach, there are no dogs allowed in the restricted area, which is from Champion Street to the Spurwink River. On Ferry Beach and Western Beach, the plover activity is really isolated for the most part on Western Beach. They don't usually turn the corner to Ferry. So no dogs are allowed from the end of the municipal parking lot, the south end of the municipal parking lot, to and including all of Western Beach. So that includes Ferry Beach to Ferry Rocks, and then around the corner to Western Beach. And so when you're out monitoring Ferry and Western, most of your time will be spent on Western Beach because that's where the birds are. And then on Pine Point, dogs must be leashed within the restricted area, which extends from Herd Park north to the Scarborough River. And so that's starting April 1st. And then on starting May 15th, the restrictions ramp up a bit, and no dogs are allowed on any of our beaches between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. From dawn until 9 a.m., dogs are allowed off leash if they're under voice control. From 5 p.m. till dusk, dogs are allowed on leash, and from dusk to dawn, no dogs are allowed on the beach again. So it's a lot to remember at first. You're going to become really familiar with all of that. And your role as a volunteer beach monitor, Laura alluded to this, is really education. So it's really to talk to people if you are comfortable doing so, especially those folks. I mean, you're wearing a badge. You may have a clipboard with your observation sheet. People may just come up and strike up a conversation with you. Perhaps this season of social distancing, I'm not quite sure what to expect and what people will be thinking about when they're on the beaches. And I see that Margie has a question, so we'll unmute Margie. Ooh.
Oh, this is just a quick question I made.
Sure.
So the plovers usually lay about 4 eggs. Is that how many do the tern lay? And do they also wait also until they're all laid before they sit on the nest?
It looks like that our Audubon folks have left. And so I don't entirely know how many eggs the terns will lay. I do know that they have very different kind of methods for, as Laura alluded to, the plovers kind of stay in their own little family groups. The terns are kind of a free-for-all and will let it be known that they don't want you near where they are. The least terns Laura mentioned are typically, if they are going to nest in Scarborough, it's on Higgins Beach. It's down close to Spurwink River. And they will usually kind of put an electric fence or an electrified fence around the area where the terns nest. Because they do like to congregate, they Audubon will actually put out decoys, decoy terns to entice them to come and nest within the area that they've kind of designated for them. But I'm sorry, I don't know off the top of my head how many eggs they typically lay, or how long it takes for them to begin sitting on their nests and incubating them.
Oh no, that's fine. That's great. Actually, that's interesting because I'll be on Higgins, so that's good information. Thank you.
Sure. All right. We've got another question. Go ahead.
Hi. I just sort of to try to understand between do not endanger yourself or put yourself at risk, and you see someone who should have their dog on a leash, or so do you, and do you approach them? Do you not approach them? Sort of, or if you're going to cover this later, I'm happy to wait.
No, I'm happy that you asked that question. So with everything, it's going to be what you're comfortable with. So if you are comfortable approaching someone and just politely asking, or asking them if they notice the signs, that the beaches are pretty well marked in terms of where dogs are allowed and when they should be on their leashes. And so you can politely, assume positive intent, give the folks benefit of the doubt. And if you're comfortable asking them or informing them that their dog should be on a leash, please do so. The number on the back of your ID badge for Scarborough Police goes to dispatch. And if there's someone or a dog owner or a dog that is really just being egregious, or the owner's being negligent, then you can call that number and they will get in touch with animal control. And animal control does patrol our beaches on a regular basis through the summer as well, trying to deal with some of these situations. But really, it's whatever you're comfortable with. So if you are comfortable approaching someone and asking them or informing them that their dog should be on the leash, great, thank you very much. And if not, you can make note of it on your observation sheet. If you do see something that that you're really concerned about in terms of a dog, I would say call the animal control and police dispatch, because really animal control is the only entity that can do something about that has the authority to make people comply with our ordinances on the beach. And I will say that as much as we hope that that we are going to have a season without any kind of negative incidents or anything like that, there's confrontations on the beach, and it can be just like upsetting. And I didn't get a lot of calls, but I did get a few calls last season with from volunteers who were just concerned about what they're seeing on the bench, or on the beach, excuse me. So we really appreciate the time that you put in there, but we ultimately want you to be safe and comfortable on the beaches. So we're going to leave it up to you. And our one of my coworkers said, we're not the Plover police. Our job is to educate and then walk away. So you do what you can. You give them the information that they need. If anyone wants any of these brochures, I can send some to you just for more information, or to be able to hand out on the beach. But really your job is to observe, educate, and then walk away, and not put yourself in a situation that you're not comfortable with. The other thing, in addition to dogs, that you might run into on the beach is just people setting up games that they are that aren't great to be done in close proximity to the plovers, and flying kites, playing frisbee, throwing a ball around, things like that. So sometimes people don't notice the signs, or maybe the area where the signs show the restricted areas. You know, maybe there aren't so many people there, so they think it's a better place to play their games. You may need to speak with them if you're comfortable and ask them to move to a different part of the beach, especially if they are within the restricted area, or if you notice a plover outside of the restricted area. This is the other thing that that Laura did mention. The plovers don't read the signs. They don't abide by the rules that the town set. They're wild animals and they can walk on the beach anywhere they want. So sometimes we may run into a situation where the birds are outside of the restricted area. And so we may need to ask people to take activities elsewhere. Hasn't been unheard of for nests to actually be laid outside of the restricted area. The restricted areas were set in the areas where historically the birds have nested, but that doesn't mean that they can change if they find a good patch of sand someplace else. So it's not unheard of for the birds to be outside of the area where we expect them to be. So the information that Laura shared in today's presentation, I think, is really helpful. And the more you get out on the beaches and get your eyes trained, it is amazing how well they camouflage. So you get your eyes trained to see, to notice their tracks, notice them moving around. And actually, I was a little bummed that Laura didn't play a clip of their song. Last year, we had some chirping, but in the form, let me grab it real quick. The sheet that was sent around that Audubon put together about kind of their life cycle and what to look for. So the sheet that has the 3 birds on the front. On the back, there is a link in there where you can listen for peeps. You can actually follow that link. It's down here. And you can play the plover song. And that's how, when I'm on the beaches, I first am listening, because I often hear them before I see them. Listen for their calls, and your ear will become trained to listen to them as well. So just want to real quickly go over I mentioned at the beginning the forms. So the first group of forms that are in your packet are for inland fisheries and wildlife. Also on there, one of their forms is tracking your time. So track your hours and the date, and also the number of miles if you had to drive to the beach. And those can be turned in at the end of the season. And then there's also an observation sheet right there. That is for the town, so recording what you're seeing on the beaches. So if you have any encounters, you can document that. Even positive encounters, we want to hear about that too. I think the vast majority of people that you meet are going to be pleasant. Unfortunately, it's the few negative interactions that do kind of stick in our mind. So I just want you to be prepared that it is probably going to happen at least once to all of you this summer, that you will run into someone who is not very pleasant. And that's, it is upsetting, but that is the time when you can just turn and walk away. It's not worth it for you to be upset, or, unfortunately, people aren't always as kind as they could be. So, but I hope for the most part that it is a really, really positive season. Scarborough beaches were the second most productive beaches in the state last year. We had, I can't even remember off the top of my head how many plovers we had fledge off of our beaches. I do know that it is one less than Popham that had the most last year. So our beach habitat is really plover friendly and has been. And I think the great work of our volunteers is a large part of that as well, making sure that people are following the ordinances that are in place to protect the endangered species while they're enjoying our beaches this summer. So with that, if there aren't any more questions, we'll probably end the training. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. You should all have my email. And just as a reminder, I'm going to be my availability is going to be somewhat limited this summer because my hours have been reduced through the end of July. But I'll do my best to respond to you all in a timely manner. So thank you all for taking the time to join us. Hopefully it was useful. And I think the more you get out there on the beaches, the more comfortable this process will be. And we do appreciate you giving us your time this summer. So again, feel free to reach out with any questions or anything that you were hoping that we would cover today that we didn't, and I will do my best to get back to you. Here's hoping we all have a great summer season. So take care, everyone. We're going to leave it at that.